Morning and welcome to Counterpoints. Emily, Crystal and Sagar are still in the hallway finishing their two-day-long argument.
They've been going.
We're going to pick it up today, though, because we've got more news on the Venezuelan migrants.
Do I have to play the role of Sagar and Jetty?
Hey, whatever works for you.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Stay tuned for that because there's actually some pretty interesting updates and some interesting reaction to how Chief Justice John Roberts decided to handle the situation yesterday. We will get to that. We're going to start first with developments in the ceasefire negotiations. Donald Trump obviously spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin yesterday and did a big interview with Laura Ingraham on Fox News last night, where we got more and more information about what a potential ceasefire deal could end up looking like. We are then going to move on to how Chief Justice John Roberts rebuked Trump and MAGA world's calls to impeach the judge that halted those migrant deportation flights. The judge impeachment calls are actually a trend. It's not just this judge. So we're going to break all of that down. We're then going to move to Ryan, a segment I think is going to be really unique to something that you're able to bring to the show via Drop Site and talk to some people who have witnessed on the ground in Gaza these strikes. Yeah, we're going to have our Mideast editor, Sharif Abdel-Quddus, join us. We may also have Abu Bakr Abed, who many of you on the show know. He's scheduled to appear. We'll see if he does this morning. He witnessed an Israeli assault on a convoy, a tank shelling that killed some of his friends, that nearly killed him. He is safe. He is obviously shaken up from the last couple days of violence. And he'll join us if he can. Hopefully he can. But if not, Sharif will be with us, who has been editing him over the last several months. How old is Abu Bakr again? Maybe he's 23 now. 23. Okay, maybe incredible. 22. He does amazing work. Yeah, this is the guy who all he wants to do is be a soccer journalist. Yeah. Football. We'll call it football for him. Yeah, give him that. So Chuck Schumer is having a hard time selling his new book. And man, Ryan, it just keeps getting worse for Chuck Schumer. He's trying to compete with Ezra Klein. You can't. I mean, what are you doing, Chuck? You can't compete with Ezra Klein. I don't know what he was thinking. Did they know? Did they realize? Did they not realize? Right. You do not come out the same day as Ezra Klein. But Chuck Schumer managed to get booked everywhere yesterday. By everywhere, I mean the CBS Morning Show and The View and Chris Hayes. So we have some highlights and lowlights to share of Chuck Schumer's media tour in the last 24 hours and some really interesting, I think, discussion points about where the Democratic Party is headed, not in the long-term future, I mean that too, but also just in the near term here. And Ryan, we have, thanks to you, Alvaro Bedoya, the FTC Commissioner, who was quote-unquote fired by Trump yesterday. That is in dispute, whether Donald Trump actually has the authority to fire him. Even some people on the right will say he doesn't have the authority because of Humphrey's executor, which is a case I know we'll get into. But they're trying to push that into the Supreme Court, like many of these battles, which are intentionally designed to test sitting precedent. Right. There's supposed to be 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats on the FTC. Trump just fired 2 of the Democrats who were Senate confirmed. Like you said, quote unquote, fired. One of them is Commissioner Bedoya. He's a Breaking Points guy. And Drop Site. And so he's going to be on the show later today talking about what his approach to the FTC was and what it means that now there will be only actually 2 Republicans, because they haven't even confirmed the third, and why, which faction within the Trump coalition may have driven this move. Yeah, this is going to be a really interesting conversation, so very happy to have him here. Let's begin with Russia. So we can put A0 up on the screen. This is a New York Times headline just about sort of a TikTok, everything that we know so far about this deal. As the New York Times says, Putin agreed on Tuesday during a phone call with Trump to temporarily halt strikes on Ukrainian energy infrastructure, according to the Kremlin. That fell short of the unconditional 30-day ceasefire that Ukraine had already agreed to at the urging of the Trump administration. They reportedly spoke, according to the Kremlin again, for more than 2 hours. Mr. Trump, the Times continues, has stated his desire to broker a truce as quickly as possible, while Putin has seemed to be seeking more concessions. Zelensky replied on Tuesday evening that Putin had, quote, effectively rejected the proposal for a full ceasefire backed by the U.S. and Ukraine. Now, Trump sat down with Laura Ingraham for an interview on Fox News last night, where we learned a little bit more about how he saw that call yesterday. This is A1. We'll roll Trump on Laura Ingraham from the White House.
Russia has the advantage, as you know. They have encircled about 2,500 soldiers. They're nicely encircled, and that's not good. And we want to get it over with. Look, we're doing this. There are no Americans involved. There could be if you end up in World War III over this, which is so ridiculous. But, you know, strange things happen. And I think we had a great call. It lasted almost 2 hours. Talked about a lot of things and toward getting it to peace. And we talked about other things also.
Was there? Here's an interesting exchange between Ingram and Trump, actually, about what the Kremlin said after the call regarding aid to Ukraine. Let's take a look at this A2.
Non-negotiables mentioned by Putin. It was reported that I think the Kremlin media actually stated that he demanded an immediate cessation of aid to Ukraine in order to get to this multi-step deal.
No, he didn't. We didn't talk about aid. Actually, we didn't talk about aid at all. We talked about a lot of things, but aid was never discussed.
So that's Trump directly disputing the Kremlin's report of what happened on the call. And just lastly, let's roll this clip of Donald Trump talking about Russia and economic power. This is this should be A3. Next clip here.
China needs us in terms of trade very badly, but we have to straighten out the deficit. We have now more than $1 trillion deficit with China. It's not even believable. And we're going to be doing something about that. And with Russia, they would like to have some of our economic power.
Finally, Ryan, let's put how Donald Trump reported on Truth Social about the call on the screen. This is the next element. He says, quote, "My phone conversation today with President Putin of Russia was a very good and productive one. We agreed to an immediate ceasefire on all energy and infrastructure with an understanding that we will be working quickly to have a complete ceasefire and ultimately an end to this very horrible war." Continues to say it never would have started if he were president. Many elements of a contract for peace were discussed, including the fact that thousands of soldiers are being killed, and both Putin and Zelensky would like to see it end. The process is now in full force and effect. But Ryan, interestingly, while the process does clearly seem to be unfolding, full force might not be the best descriptor. If you're Trump, it's one way to spin it, but might not be the best descriptor given the way that Zelensky responded to news from the call yesterday.
Well, you can tell Trump felt pretty good about how it went because if you notice, there was only one word in all caps in that Truth Social, and it was end. He's going to end the war. Obviously, lots of exclamation points, but you know, that's what you're going to get.
Of course.
You can kind of check his emotional register by mapping it to the number of all caps statements. If it's shot through with all caps, like he is feeling besieged and angry, and how dare people be doing these things to him when all he wants is peace for the world. So in that sense, it seems like he feels like he's getting somewhere. He also talked about something that he understands, which is sports and entertainment, through the bilateral cultural exchange of joint hockey games. And
this is A5.
Put this one up. Put A5 in March 2022. The NHL told the KHL, forget it. Like, we're not partnering with you guys. You can't invade Ukraine. And they've been kicked out of the Olympics. The Russian agents weren't allowed to work with the NHL teams anymore. You may or may not know, ice hockey is a rather big deal over in Russia. And so Trump here is floating the possibility of thawing that, to use a terrible pun.
Wow.
So I didn't do that on purpose. But after I got there, I'm like, look, this is what we got to go.
It's Dad Joke Wednesday, I guess.
This is accidental dad joke.
That's actually more like bad news anchor joke.
Bad news anchor
Someone's
joke.
writing the teleprompter script. Yeah.
I just kind of slipped onto that one. So the problem here that the U.S. is facing, as Trump clearly articulated to Zelensky in the White House, is that we don't have any cards. Like he says he doesn't. He told Zelensky he doesn't have any cards. The U.S. really doesn't have any cards either, except for the economic power.
Right.
Which, by the way, can we just underscore the irony here that Trump wants to destroy our trade relations with Canada, Mexico, Europe, everyone else around the world, except for Russia?
Right.
Kind of hilarious.
Yeah, it was funny.
Okay, whatever. So the problem is...
Well, especially because doesn't he blame the lifting of sanctions of Nord Stream 2, and many people on the right do, myself included, the Biden administration's lifting of sanctions on Nord Stream 2 is one of the key factors that pushed Putin to invade Ukraine when he did.
Yeah, one of the many incoherent I think, approaches where Trump is both uber hawkish towards Russia and also then a dove when it comes to war. Like he wants confrontation right up until the edge.
Right.
That he doesn't want war, but then he says that Putin was justified in the invasion because of the hawkishness of U.S. foreign policy. It's like, well, wait a minute, you're one of the most hawkish. Never mind. So Putin has a bunch of demands that are rooted in the fact that they are winning. And that is the fundamental structural problem that Trump is facing in trying to wrap this up immediately. So we can put this up on the screen. The conditions that that Putin is insisting on, the key condition is the one that Trump says they didn't even talk about. Complete cessation of foreign military aid and sharing intelligence information with Kyiv. Hopefully they're recording these conversations, because if historians are going to rely on the competing words of Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump to get an accurate rendition of how the conversation went, God help us.
He said.
God help the historians. So then the second one, Putin says he wants to stop the forced mobilization in Ukraine and the rearmament of armed forces. So stop drafting people and stop arming Ukraine. It's a pretty huge demand.
Yep.
And then any settlement should be complex, stable, and long-term in nature and must take into account the absolute need to eliminate the root causes of the crisis. It must also consider the legitimate interests of Russia in the area of security. So the easy part of that is, that means kind of no NATO. What it's subtly suggesting is that they don't just want the area that they currently hold, but they want, deeper into eastern Ukraine, which their argument is, you can either give it to us or we're going to take it. And if we take it, it's going to be bloody, and we're going to take a lot. We're going to take a lot more with it. And so, basically, he is saying that if you're going to give up, we're turning Ukraine into a complete vassal state that we can basically manipulate, politically from Russia, which is. In other words, it would be like a country in our sphere of influence. Like this is, that's how roughly we would handle Guatemala or something along those lines. So, how much Trump cares about this versus how much the kind of U.S. deep state cares about this, I guess would indicate whether or not the U.S. is going to be willing to capitulate to this. On the other hand, the encirclement that he talked about is very real. And this is the other thing that Putin is talking about. He's like, what about these guys? So we're like encircling these guys. We're about to capture them. So if we do a ceasefire, they can just walk out. And that is a legitimate question. It's like, how does that work? Like they invaded, in that part, they invaded the Kursk region of Russia.
Right.
They just walk out. I don't know, what do you think?
Well, let's even put this last element back up to keep this conversation going about Trump and economic power. This is an interesting juxtaposition here where you have Scott Bessent. On April 2nd, each country will get a tariff number, and then White House. Future with an improved bilateral relationship between the United States and Russia has huge upside. This includes enormous economic deals. That's, we have all kinds of sanctions on Russia, and who knows what Russia's tariff would be, potentially, if this economic relationship is blossoming under Donald Trump. But right, it's kind of, I think it's interesting from the perspective of like what Donald Trump's foreign policy is, because it's very, like we talk all the time, he's not a John Bolton type neoconservative ideologue, but he does believe in economic power as his like source of creating world peace, which is not an insane, it's obviously not an insane idea that when you have economic ties to different countries, it deters violence, but it's also sort of not where the right is anymore. And if that's, Gaza Riviera in Russia, if that's part of, I think maybe that's being hyperbolic, but if Putin, does Putin respond to that in a way that Donald Trump actually wants him to? Does he respond to the prospect of economic opportunities with the United States the same way that Donald Trump wants Vladimir Putin to? I think Putin has ambitions beyond, I guess, the economic ties with the United States, in that he wants regional power. And I'm not saying which
he already has, by virtue of being powerful.
Yeah. But I'm not saying that to say he has this like design set on Western Europe, but his ambitions are not purely economic.
Sure, and yeah, they clearly want influence in Western Europe.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. But yeah,
Hence Nord Stream 2.
yeah, and we, we potentially there was an opportunity to try to end this in March of 2022. The U.S. decided not to do that. Whether they could have actually ended it or not is an open question, which will never be answered because we didn't pursue it. And now it has not gone well. Like the U.S. put whatever it could up against Russia here, $100+ billion. Europe put in $100+ billion worth of weapons. They drafted everybody they could find, and they're losing badly. Mm-hmm. And they hoped that they would weaken Russia. Russia came out stronger.
I mean, Russia has been weakened, absolutely.
I guess certainly they've lost a lot of men.
They've lost a lot of men. Their economy is not incredible.
Their economy is not incredible, but geopolitically, are they weaker today than they were in February 22? I'm not sure. I think they're probably in a better position.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I guess that's fair. But there has been a cost
Europe.
There's been a cost to them.
There's been right. Yeah. But I think they sanction-proofed their economy in a substantial way. Mm-hmm. They did not get the collapse that MSNBC promised its audience.
Yes. Yeah.
There was been no real split with China. Tighter than ever, maybe.
I was going to say, yeah, that is a great point. So
Joe Biden does not have a PhD in foreign affairs. He's just that good.
He's that good. Just crushed it. We learn more about Joe Biden's successes with each passing day. All right, well, let's move.
He showed up for St. Patty's Day. It was like his first comment on anything.
I didn't see that. He just put out a tweet or something?
Just to celebrate, St. Patty's Day.
He just put out like a social media
some
post.
Statement or something.
But nobody saw him in the wild.
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So that would be even
maybe
better.
He was at some bar in Lewis, Delaware.
What'd you do?
I wore my O'Kelly's shirt from Guantanamo Bay. There's an Irish bar on Guantanamo Bay. So.
You're fun.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.